In a galaxy ruled by strength and centuries of tradition, one human cadet stood alone, quiet, underestimated, and dismissed by all, until the day he was publicly humiliated by the most feared instructor at the academy. What happened next wasn't just a fight, it was a turning point. A single act of defiance that shook the system, shattered prejudice, and rewrote the meaning of power. This isn't just another sci-fi story. This is the moment one human made the entire galaxy stop and watch. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The AWAM, Archeon Stellar Defense Institute, orbiting the brilliant white star Arisia, was known across the galaxy as a place where the best minds and strongest warriors from over 50 species came to train. It was a symbol of unity, at least on the surface. The gleaming metal towers and polished halls told a story of order and excellence, but under that smooth exterior was something less harmonious. For all its pride and diversity, the Institute had never quite figured out what to do with humans. Nico, Darren, a cadet in his second year, knew this better than anyone. He had learned early on to keep his head down, to observe more than speak, and to work twice as hard to be seen half as competent. He was shorter than most cadets, less physically intimidating, and far more prone to second-guessing his every word in the company of alien peers who considered humans amusing at best, primitive at worst. He didn't hate them for it. He just didn't have the luxury to fight every battle. That morning he walked into strategic combat theory class 10 minutes early, his uniform neat, eyes sharp but cautious. Instructor Thenax was already there, looming at the front of the amphitheater-style classroom. A towering figure of scaled skin and horned brow, Thenax was a member of the Gravarian species, a people known for their battlefield brilliance and absolute disdain for inefficiency. His glare alone had sent cadets from other species fleeing in tears, though he never raised his voice. He didn't have to. Nico took a seat near the middle row, close enough to engage but not draw attention. Around him, cadets filtered in, a lanky Sevronian with twitching antennae, a set of twins from the wind-born Drillari, and several others who moved like they belonged here, who didn't second-guess their place in the galaxy's finest military institute. One seat behind Nico, a cadet named Rail sat with a dramatic sigh. Amphibious and always half-joking, Senner was the only one who treated Nico like an equal. Ready to be mentally disassembled? Senner whispered with a grin. I hear Thenax is in one of his moods. Nico gave a faint smile but didn't answer. The lesson began with Thenax's usual precision. He paced the front like a silent storm, calling up holographic projections of past battles, analyzing decisions made by legendary tacticians. His voice, deep and deliberate, filled the room with measured disdain. Knowledge is not just information, he said. It is execution under pressure. It is instinct shaped by discipline. Something your species, his gaze landed directly on Nico, often lacks. The room fell quiet. Thenax rarely singled out students directly. Nico sat a little straighter, keeping his expression blank. He had learned not to rise to the bait. Cadet Darren, Thenax said, perhaps you would enlighten us. What is the first maneuver taught when outnumbered by a force equipped with plasma thread artillery? Nico replied without hesitation. Evasive flank descent, sir. It creates a diversion field that breaks target lock for several seconds. Incorrect. Thenax cut in smoothly. That maneuver was deemed ineffective 5 cycles ago. Clearly, your reading is behind. Soft laughter bubbled through the room. Not cruel, but enough to sting. Senner frowned, looking like he wanted to speak, but Nico gave a slight shake of his head. He didn't need a rescue. Perhaps, Thenax continued, turning away. We should organize a practical demonstration. A lesson in what happens when outdated knowledge meets real combat. The tension in the room spiked. Cadets shifted in, their seats whispering with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Everyone knew what practical demonstration meant. It was rare, and it usually ended with one bruised student and one satisfied instructor. Thenax had never lost a match. Center. Leaned forward. He's picking you. Nico didn't answer. He was still staring ahead, but his jaw had clenched. Thenax had made his opinion of humans clear since Nico's first week. He considered them a short-lived species of overachievers, clever but reckless, lacking refinement and discipline. And now he wanted to prove it. The demonstration will occur tomorrow, Thenax declared. Combat Dome 3. Cadet Darren, be prepared. Class ended soon after, but Nico remained seated for a moment. The room emptied around him, the silence settling like a weight on his shoulders. Tomorrow he would face a being who had crushed cadets twice his size. It wouldn't be a test. It would be a message, an example to anyone who thought a human could match the elite. Outside the classroom, the corridors buzzed with cadets trading theories and mock predictions. Some pretended to place bets. Others laughed nervously. Word traveled fast at the institute. That evening, Nico sat alone in the observation dome, staring at the stars. They were the same stars Earth had seen for thousands of years, even if the people who looked at them were now scattered across galaxies. He thought of his family, the ones who had encouraged him to apply to the institute. He thought of the history, books full of explorers and scientists and soldiers who had done the impossible with less training and fewer tools than he had now. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest. But he had something else. He studied. He adapted. And tomorrow, he'd make sure the galaxy remembered what humans were really made of. The next day, the combat dome felt like the heart of a storm. Wide and circular, the massive chamber could shift its gravity, lighting, and atmospheric levels depending on the scenario. Today, it was set to standard conditions, though the tension in the air made it hard to breathe. Rows of cadets lined the upper walkways, whispering to one another. Everyone had come to watch. Word had spread. The human was facing instructor Thenax. Nico Darren stood in the center of the dome, his uniform crisp, his stance calm. But inside, his thoughts were racing. He'd spent the night reviewing tactics, physiology files, and footage of Thenax's previous demonstrations. He knew this wasn't just about combat. This was about proving something larger, that humans didn't need to be pitied, protected, or doubted. They deserved their place in the galaxy. Instructor Thenax entered from the far side, his long shadow stretching across the training floor. His eyes, a sharp copper hue, scanned the crowd before settling on Nico. The instructor didn't speak right away. He simply stepped onto the mat and nodded. The match was about to begin. Observation and evaluation, Thenax announced. That's what today is. Watch closely. See how easily strength overcomes guesswork and pride. Nico said nothing. He had no illusions. Thenax was bigger, stronger, and far more experienced. But Nico had learned something important during his short time at the Institute. Brute force was predictable, and anything predictable could be countered. Thenax moved first, not with reckless speed, but with precise, deliberate motion. His claws swept through the air as he lunged, forcing Nico to duck and roll. Nico didn't try to strike back yet. He evaded, watching for patterns, weaknesses. He'd trained for this. Back on Earth, in simulated gravity and with instructors who believed in him, he'd studied more than just human fighting styles. He had pored over alien anatomy files, practiced movements from species far stronger than himself. The second swing came fast, too fast. It grazed Nico's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He barely caught his balance before Thenax was on him again. This time, Nico countered with a sharp jab to the side. It bounced off Thenax's armored hide like a pebble on steel. Predictable, Thenax muttered, stepping back with a bored expression. Always the same. Humans rush when they should wait, attack when they should observe. Nico breathed heavily. He knew better than to argue. He shifted his position, staying low, forcing Thenax to adjust his angle. The instructor circled, clearly enjoying the moment, playing with his prey. You cannot win this, Thenax said. You're only delaying the result. Nico took a half step forward, testing a feint, then slipped backward when Thenax reacted. He was starting to see it. The instructor's right side was slightly slower. There was a tightness in his motion when pivoting, probably an old injury, something hidden by strength but still exploitable. But then suddenly, Thenak struck. His tail swept under Nico's feet, sending him crashing to the floor. Before he could move, a clawed hand grabbed his arm and twisted, not hard enough to break but enough to hurt. "See?" Thenak said. "Reality does not care about ambition." He shoved Nico backward. The human rolled once and scrambled upright, clutching his arm. Around them, cadets watched in silence. Some looked concerned. Most expected it to end soon. Nico stared at Thenak's chest rising and falling. His body hurt, his pride burned. But his mind, it was sharper than ever. He remembered something. An old file he'd found in a forgotten corner of the Academy's digital library, buried under outdated tactics and obscure biology entries. It described nerve clusters in Gravarian anatomy, vulnerable spots not usually trained against because most opponents wouldn't even know they existed. Nico took a step forward. Then another. Then Nax tilted his head, amused. "Still pretending you have a chance?" Nico didn't reply. Instead, he suddenly shifted to the side, drew in close, and launched a fast, precise strike. Not to Thenax's chest, not his jaw, but just beneath the back edge of the neck where 3 muscle cords intersected. The instructor let out a grunt. Not pain, exactly, but surprise. His stance faltered. Nico didn't wait. He used Thenax's own motion to twist under him, delivering another calculated blow to a different pressure point. Thenak stumbled backward, visibly shaken. The dome erupted in murmurs. No one had ever seen him lose footing in a match. Nico held his ground, breathing hard, waiting for the next attack. It came with fury. Thenak charged. But now Nico was ready. He rolled to the side, came up low, and swept a leg, unbalancing the giant for just a second. It was enough. With a forceful push and perfect timing, Nico drove Thenak off balance. The instructor fell hard, landing with a thud that shook the arena. The silence was instant. Dozens of cadets stared, wide-eyed. Thenak didn't get up immediately. He blinked, stunned, as if he didn't understand what had just happened. Nico didn't gloat. He didn't smile or raise his hands. He stepped back, offered a respectful nod, and waited. Thenak sat up slowly, eyes locked on the cadet who had just done the unthinkable. And for the first time since Nico arrived at the institute, the crowd didn't laugh. They watched. And they remembered. The energy in the combat dome didn't fade after the match. It changed. What had begun as a simple lesson turned into something none of the cadets had expected. Nico Darren, the quiet human no one took seriously, had stood his ground against the most feared instructor at the institute. And for a few silent moments, even Thenak seemed unsure of what to do. The audience remained frozen, their eyes darting between the fallen instructor and the still-standing cadet. Thenak rose slowly, his expression unreadable. His breathing was controlled, but his shoulders were tense. There was no applause, no cheers, only the soft hum of the dome's systems. Nico stepped back respectfully, maintaining the correct stance as he had been trained. He didn't smile, didn't show off. Inside, his heart was pounding like a drum, but on the outside, he stayed still, calm and focused. Then, everything shifted. Without warning, Thenak stepped forward and struck Nico across the face with the flat of his hand. It wasn't a trained combat strike, it wasn't a technique, it was a slap. Quick, sharp, and deeply personal. The sound echoed through the dome. The cadets gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others simply stared, stunned. No instructor had ever laid a hand on a cadet like that in recent memory. Not like this. Nico's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed on his cheek. He didn't move, he didn't fall. He stood exactly where he was, eyes forward, jaw tight. The silence thickened. Thenak towered over him, scales shifting darker. "That," he said quietly, "is your place." For one breathless second, the dome held still. Then Nico moved. It was like watching time fold in on itself. He twisted out of the instructor's reach with a sharp motion, dropped low and launched upward with a speed that seemed impossible. His fingers struck the base of Thenex's neck, exactly where the Graverian vocal tendons met. A soft pop sounded. Thenex's voice caught in his throat. Before the instructor could react, Nico spun again, using Thenex's own momentum against him. The older warrior stumbled. Nico shifted weight, redirected force, and flipped Thenax over his shoulder. The instructor landed hard on the mat with a thunderous crash. The seismic dampeners flickered in response. The cadets burst into chaos. Voices cried out. Several were already recording the moment with their neural links. Center rail up in the front row simply whispered, "No way." Thenax groaned, stunned and disoriented. Nico stood over him, one knee lightly pressing against the instructor's chest, his elbow close to a vital pressure point. He wasn't harming him. He was in control. It was clear to everyone watching. The cadet had won. "Sir," Nico said calmly, his cheek still burning red, "I believe the demonstration is complete." Thenax couldn't reply. The nerve strike Nico had used temporarily blocked his vocal cords. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The silence returned, heavier than before. Some cadets looked shocked. Others looked impressed. For the first time, they weren't laughing at the human. They were watching him with something else, something closer to respect. The dome doors slid open. A figure entered. Director Melia Yorn, the Academy's lead training officer. Her long robe shimmered slightly as she walked across the arena floor with quiet authority. She had seen the end of the fight from the surveillance hub. Her face, though calm, carried a sharp edge. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice echoing across the dome. No one answered right away. Finally, a cadet spoke up. "Instructor, Thenax initiated a practical demonstration. Cadet Darren was selected." The cadet hesitated, then added, "He slapped the cadet after losing control." Melia's gaze turned to Nico. "Is this true?" "Yes, Director," Nico said, still kneeling beside Thenax. "He struck me outside the rules of engagement." Thenax sat up with effort, his voice hoarse and strained as it began to return. "He humiliated me. In front of the class." "You humiliated yourself," Melia replied, "by forgetting your responsibility as an instructor." She looked to Nico. "You used advanced nerve techniques. Where did you learn them?" "Public. Database, ma'am. I researched Graverian anatomy. It was legal, just not common." The director nodded. "Resourceful. Stand down, cadet. Report to the medical wing." Nico stepped away from Thenax, offering a hand out of habit. The gesture wasn't returned. Melia turned to the rest of the class. "Training is suspended until further notice. Return to your quarters. Immediately." As the cadets left, most glanced back at Nico. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer a curiosity. He was something new, something they'd never seen before. A human who stood toe-to-toe with someone considered untouchable, and didn't blink. Word spread like wildfire. In minutes, the footage reached cadets in every level of the academy. Across species and cliques, messages lit up private channels. "Did you see it? The human took him down." Thenax got dropped. By the end of the day, a phrase had started to circulate, half joking, half in awe. Don't underestimate Earthlings, and Nico Darren, once the quiet outlier, had become the story the entire galaxy was suddenly watching. Nico Darren stood before the Grand Council chamber of the Archeon Stellar Defense Institute, surrounded by tall, marble pillars and silver-lit panels that flickered with the Academy's history. The walls themselves seemed to watch, lined with portraits of past leaders from every corner of the galaxy. Behind a wide desk sat Director Melia Yorn, her expression unreadable, her voice calm and controlled. Instructor Thenax stood to her left, his scales now a muted shade of gray, his posture stiffer than usual. There were no students here, no spectators, only truth and consequence. The silence in the chamber felt thicker than the gravity settings. Melia tapped one finger against the polished surface of her console. "We have reviewed all visual records. Verbal reports and internal assessments regarding the incident in Combat Dome 3, she began. Both of you are present to provide clarity and to receive judgment. Nico nodded once, standing at attention, hands folded behind his back. He had been cleared medically, but the red mark on his face still faintly showed. He had refused treatment for it. Thenax remained silent, his eyes focused on the far wall rather than the people in the room. The footage confirms without doubt that Instructor Thenax struck a cadet in a manner outside of Academy protocol, Melia continued. This alone is a breach of conduct regardless of intent or outcome. Thenax finally spoke. His voice was lower than usual, rougher. It was not intended as punishment. It was a moment of frustration, an error in judgment. Melia narrowed her eyes. Frustration does not excuse violence, Instructor. You are held to a higher standard. You do not act in anger. You guide. You lead. She turned to Nico. And you, Cadet Darren, use techniques not included in the basic curriculum. How did you come to know such precise anatomical weaknesses? Independent research, Nico replied. All information was from the Academy's public archives. I memorized what I could. I knew I was physically outmatched. I had to rely on knowledge. The room was quiet again for a moment. Melia tapped her console once more, and a projection of Nico's training record appeared above the desk. Scores, evaluations, and remarks floated in mid-air. Most were positive. A few, especially from Thenax, were harsh and marked with inconsistent justification. I see a pattern here, Melia said. You were failed on several occasions where you met the required standards. You were assigned extra duties under reasons that appear vague. You were publicly challenged more than any other cadet in your division. Thenax's jaw tightened. I held him to a higher standard. I was trying to make him stronger. Were you? Melia asked, her voice sharp. Or were you trying to prove a point about his species? The question hung in the air. Thenax didn't answer. I will not remove you from your post, Melia finally said, but your curriculum will now be monitored. Furthermore, a new section will be added to your course, Adaptive Cross-Species, Combat Strategy, and it will be co-taught by Cadet Darren. Thenax's eyes widened slightly. You want me to share my class with him? I want you to learn what it means to truly teach, Melia replied. He earned the respect of this academy. It's time you learned what that looks like. Nico was stunned but kept his expression still. Director, I accept the assignment. Good, she said. Dismissed. The next week, the new class began. The room was packed. Cadets from across all years and species filled the seats, whispering in curiosity. On one side of the room stood Thenax, towering and composed. On the other, Nico Darren, wearing the same clean uniform, but now with a new kind of posture, one that came from knowing he had a place here, no matter what anyone had once believed. Thenax spoke first, explaining the fundamentals of species-based advantages and traditional combat responses. His tone was firm, but there was something different, an edge of caution. He nodded to Nico, signaling him to take over. Nico walked to the center. The room quieted. The key, he said, is not to view strength or weakness as fixed. Every opponent has patterns. Every species has limits. If you understand how they move, breathe, and think, you can turn any fight in your favor. He demonstrated a few techniques, using a volunteer cadet to show how observation and adaptation mattered more than power. Thenax watched, arms crossed, but without judgment. At the end of the session, as the cadets filed out, one stopped in front of Nico. She was tall, from a species with crystalline skin that shimmered in the light. I never thought humans had much to teach, she said. But I was wrong. Most people are, Nico replied softly. Until they're not. Later, as the room emptied, Thenax approached. His scales had settled into a cool, deep blue, a color rarely seen. He extended one clawed hand, the Graverian gesture of respect and recognition. Nico hesitated for a second, then reached out and shook it. You surprised me, Thenax said. I underestimated you. I won't do that again. You weren't the only one, Nico answered, but I hope the others come around too. They stood there for a moment, two different worlds meeting not in battle but in understanding. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something. Outside, the stars burned bright over the academy dome, distant and eternal. Inside, something had shifted. Not just for Nico Darren, but for every human who would come after him. The lesson wasn't about fighting. It was about being seen, about standing up when no one believed you could. And now, thanks to one quiet cadet, the galaxy would never forget what a human could do.